See that?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. So we're going to talk about microaggressions today, and this is going to be mostly, um, I'm going to say a lot of different things. I'll just go to the next slide, actually. The point of it is defining racial microaggressions and understanding differences, understanding the psychological impact, and then learning to ways to talk about it regardless of what side of the interaction you're on. Um, I will say that, a lot of this, I have probably too many slides to do this in an hour, but this is two parts. So part of the discussion part will probably have the last bits of those slides. But also, I'll be doing a little bit of talking, but I'll be also asking you guys a few questions. I think in the next two slides, actually, I'll ask a question. But the whole main point of this is to provide a community that is accepting, loving, and understanding of all different points of view. And so if you're into that, if that's the thing that you're interested in, you've come to the right place. Um, so my first question is, if anyone's brave enough to define microaggressions, and you don't have to have the right answer. I will provide a definition in a second, but I just want to see where we're at with knowing what microaggressions are.
Can I try, Alex?
Yeah, go for it.
Microaggressions are intentional or unintentional gestures that is shown to someone who is oppressed,
Hmm.
and it kind of shows a superiority from someone who is directing it. I don't know.
Right. So there's a bit of uh, I'll actually just go to the definition, but Yaman, you got it pretty good. Um, the brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults towards people of color. So it got pretty much, most of that definition. One of the things that we kind of miss sometimes actually are the behavioral environmental things. It is both intentional or unintentional. And it has that sense of, or it has an underlying meaning um, that conveys superiority, conveys negative stereotypes, and you'll see in the next slides that they go unnoticed, especially by people who are in positions of privilege. Microaggressions are also not just racial microaggressions. Um, they can have microaggressions for sexual orientation, microaggressions for gender, microaggressions for religion, all these other different things. Uh, but for this presentation, we're just going to focus on racial microaggressions. So just to give you an idea um, of some things that are labeled under microaggressions, or some things people say, my best friend is Asian. Let's say that you said something that was a little bit offensive, and your friend says, "What was that about?" And it's like, no, it's not anything. My best friend is Asian. We're totally cool. You don't act black. I've received that many times. Very, it makes the person of color, the person who's receiving them, feel very uncomfortable. I'm surprised you can't dance, play basketball, speak Mandarin. Certain environmental ones would include something like television shows without representation of people of color. And certain behaviors would be like if you're walking down the street and you see a person of color, um, like clutching your bag or like moving away. Um, and the difficulty, or one of the things about microaggressions, as I said before, is it's socialized. It is, these behaviors, these communications, especially for people in privilege. In this instance, it would be white Americans, um, would be considered normal interactions. You know, being able to. I have a quick story of when I was in, I think I was high school, college age, I had a lot more hair than I do now. And people would, or usually white people would pick at my hair and be like, "What's with their hair? What's going on there?" And I'm like, that's a violation of personal space, and it kind of like makes me feel like I'm just some kind of rag doll to be touched. And so, but for the other side, they might just like, oh, it's fine, it's whatever, I'm just interested in this thing. But for someone else, in a person of color in that position, they might find it as an indignity. And for all those things that we'd said a little bit before, and a few more that we'll talk about, these are consistent, repetitive stressors for a person receiving them. And to kind of give you a better idea, oh, before we get into that, I'm going to talk a little bit, just because we gave some definitions here. Um, I want to talk a little bit about some critiques that show up, that might show up for you, because they these kinds of things are so subtle, or so kind of, we've got accustomed to it to the point where, people are get very frustrated or annoyed with the idea that, some of the things they say, some of the things they do are not things that not things that are helpful, or things that are hurtful to others. And any questions about that before I move on? All right, cool. So some critiques, and there are many more. There are academic critiques, there are non-academic critiques, but I feel like the two most important ones are intention versus outcome, and PC culture. A lot of people will talk about, well, this isn't fair because these things can be unintentional. How am I supposed to do anything if I didn't have an intention to do it? Well, they can be brought into someone's awareness if they have an intention for a positive relationship with people who are of a different race from you. If your intention is to have a positive relationship with a person of color, person in a different socioeconomic status, person of different gender, you got to be aware of some of the things that you say or do might hurt or offend. So it's important not only that you have an intention, but that you understand or look for that outcome as well. Um, like, for example, if you want to be a famous uh, basketball star, just having the intention is not going to get you there. You want to be able to have that intention, practice, watch games, have a coach, etc., to get to that point. And so these things are going to take some time as well. Some of the things that we do are unintentional, yes, but the more we bring awareness to it, the more we're going to be able to do something about it. Know, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that, or maybe there's a bias underneath that, or maybe someone else is going to perceive a bias underneath that. And that's part of why, this program is here, but also why it's important to continue to do the work after this. This is just PC culture trying to tell me what to say and do. Well, I kind of go back to that intention piece. I'm not telling you what to say or do. I'm really not. But if your goal is to have a positive relationship, positive community that is safe for everybody, then I would definitely consider thinking about what you say and do. And that's all I have to say about that. So I wanted to give us an idea of what that looks like in action. And I'm actually going to do it in a way that's a little bit strange, because this next video has microaggressions in it, but it's almost like it's flipped around, flipped on its head. This is the idea of if white people experience microaggressions to the level that people of color have. I think I actually have it. Ignore the ad.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white.
People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So, where are you from?
No, where are you really from?
Why do you have an accent? Like a
like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo.
Act entitled in the supermarket.
I love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp.
Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my God, so it just does that?
No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney.
Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's C-H-A-D, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer.
How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office?
Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this?
I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun.
What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so
okay,
I know about
but I
white culture.
backpacked
Okay,
in
was
Europe.
So can you say how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular rap song and, like, make it a ukulele song? It's so cool. I think it's so cool how you...
All right. So we got the idea, right? I have just another question. So how would you feel if every day or, you know, every other day, you know, you've experienced something like that, just on a constant basis?
It almost feels like we don't belong here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It kind of puts you in a position of being a foreigner or outside. Anyone else? Seeing in the chat, people enjoyed the videos, seeing it reversed a little bit.
I knew that it existed. The point about being constant daily stressor was, struck me when you said that.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit further in the PowerPoint. But yeah, the fact that it's like not just one situation, it just goes on and on and on. It's usually not the same person, but like it's experiencing of alienation in some ways.
And sometimes it's said in a very condescending manner. So you feel like you're very inferior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a class where the professor was like, "Oh wait, have you guys seen these calculators before? Was it available in your country?"
Wow.
And it's just like, oh, okay.
So yeah, and I won't speak for Yaman, but that sounds like it really has a judgment, like a stereotype in there. So yeah, I can see why that would hurt, hearing that.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced my fair share of getting pressed, like just being asked, like when people ask me my ethnicity, and then they go on to like ask if I speak Spanish, and then most of the time I'll tell them not so much, because I just had circumstances that didn't quite help me with my second language development. But then that straight question right out of the gate, like, "Oh, you don't know Spanish?" And I'm just like, Yeah.
Yeah, it's and then it happening over and over again, and kind of out of the gate. It's hard to, I don't know. I just know for myself, I won't speak for Dennis, but I'll know for myself, where are you from kind of thing. It doesn't happen for me that often, but it's like when it happens, you're like, oh, you're from Jamaica, Kenya, the bird is like, wait, what can't I just be from New Jersey? I actually have a friend who was asked where she was from, and she looks Vietnamese, but she was born in Pennsylvania, and she was adopted as well. And she was asked at the library where she worked by someone where she's from, and she's like, oh, I'm from Pennsylvania. No, but where are you really from? It's like, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's like, where are your family from? It's like, Italy. And, you know, she was playing with them a little bit, but it was the idea is like, she knows for herself that she doesn't have that culture of Vietnamese, but she does look Vietnamese. But it's, even just being asked that constantly tells you that people don't see her as an American. So,
and I think, and just to what you were saying, Alex, and I think like bringing up things like that to people, you know, you were talking about the intent, like, oh, the intent might appear positive to, oh, get someone to talk about their culture, where they're really from, but in all reality, that could be a very like painful thing for someone. And we just don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah. So with all that being said, you know, I encourage us to even just take a step back and remember we're all human. You know, we know that, or most of the time, people don't have the intent to hurt. If you're one of the people who have said a microaggression to another person, which I will say, it's not something we'll talk too much about, but even between people of color, you can have microaggressions. So if you're one of the people who is given a microaggression, and I'm sure even I have, just remember that we're human. It's going to take some time and some awareness. If we have the intent to change, we have the possibility of doing so. So yeah, just wanted to say that. So to get into like, this is the more nitty gritty section with definitions. This is also based on the work of Daryl Wang Su, Dr. Daryl Wang Su, who is from the University of Oregon. He is a clinical psychologist. He's one of the four fathers in some ways of this research. The person who started it was actually Dr. Chester N. Pierce, who's a psychiatrist. And you know, they initially were interested in like the work of clinicians and how they you know, a lot of clinicians are white, just the truth, and white women. So they're doing a lot of work on helping these clinicians who are from different backgrounds relate and understand that what they're saying or doing might not feel good to their clients. But then they extrapolated it out, and so social psychology research has extrapolated out to larger society. Let me just look at the chat because I notice it's moving. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Yaman, for answering that question. 3 types of microaggression based on Dr. Daryl Wang Su: microassault, microinsult, and microinvalidation. So this is on a spectrum of whether it's conscious bias or unconscious bias. Microassault being, you know, pretty conscious, and microinvalidation being pretty unconscious. Now, do different microaggressions kind of fall within the spectrum? And you might have something that's somewhere in the middle between microinsult and microinvalidation sometimes. It's not really a perfect science there, but it's something to help us gauge different types of microaggressions. So I'll go into more detail there. Microassault, explicit, nonverbal, or verbal attack, which is intended to harm using name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions, also known as old-fashioned racism. this is kind of the racial epithets. This is the I'm purposefully wearing a swastika or the KKK hat, or I'm purposefully avoiding you because of your race. Or recently, Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper was filmed by a person of color who saw that this person wasn't, having a leash on her dog and wanted to like rectify the situation. And she decided, I don't care for your advice. I've decided that you're a person of color who is uh, a threat to me, even though there is no actual sign of a threat. And so I'm going to purposefully call the police, tell them you're a threat, knowing that there is a danger to your life if I do this. That is a purposeful discriminatory action. Any questions about that? Usually these micro assaults are expressed in anonymity. That's kind of the a lot of, if you're like white and you're saying racial epithets about Black people or people of Asian descent or et cetera with each other, that's kind of happens a lot. I remember there used to be a TV show that like caught white people doing something like that. But usually it's anonymous, but they know that it's biased. Maybe displayed during emotional outbursts. If you remember all these Instagram or TikTok videos or whatever, probably not TikTok, but videos where people will be angry or frustrated and then they, yell at people and say all types of racial slurs. And here are just some examples that I just already said. Now, micro insults are more subtle, usually unintentional by the perpetrator, but convey hidden insults. This is the, oh, you're so articulate, or you don't really look like a manager. I wasn't expecting someone like you. Or where are you actually from? So it has a hidden meaning underneath what is being said. And context is important. If it's, two people who are Black and one of them is more of a manager and the other one, the person might say, oh, I don't expect, I don't think that color should matter in job applications. That's going to have a different feel for someone when it's, the white manager saying it to a Black employee or something like that, or a soon-to-be employee. So that's the why context is important there. Here are just some examples. One of which can be nonverbal, like let's say a white employer ignoring the opinions of Black employees during a meeting. Remember, all of these things, or most of these things, can be either verbal, behavioral, or environmental. Now, micro-invalidation is where communication that doesn't take into consideration the point of view, feelings, or experiences of the person of color. And just to give you some examples, Asian Americans complimented on speaking good English, not thinking of the experience that they might just be born in America and know English. A Black person being told that the other person, or even, I'll even go back to that one because it's like they might just know English well because they were taught English. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it just seems like there is a idea that the country or the person is not going to be able to do that because of some kind of stereotype. A Black person being told that the other person doesn't see race. Latinos being told not to worry by a white friend when they say they've received dirty looks by store owners. So it's invalidating their experience. Any questions about that? Any concerns? Thoughts, surprises? All right. Now this next slide is going to violate every PowerPoint rule ever, but I'm just going to run through it very quickly to give you an idea of all different other types of microaggressions. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is a good way of kind of categorizing them. Alien in your own land kind of microaggressions. This is where are you from? It's like that kind of questions. Ascription of, oh, I should say, that's a type. The middle is an example, and the one on the right is the underlying meaning. So ascription of intelligence, your credit to your race, you're so articulate, holding a meaning of, you know, I stereotype, or I believe that, you know, Black people or people of color are not generally as intelligent as whites. Color blindness. When I look at you, I don't see color, basically ignoring their different experience. Assumption of criminal status. A store owner following a person of color around a store. Denial of individual racism. You usually see that one in like, oh, I have my experience of being a woman, a disabled person, etc. So I get your experience. That's a definite micro-invalidation. Myth of meritocracy. Everyone in society will succeed if they work hard enough. Basically implying, you know, if you're Black and you haven't worked hard enough, or you're Latina, you're not working hard enough if you don't succeed. So that doesn't include all the discrimination, bias, socioeconomic status, the cultural, or not the cultural context, but the context that they were born in. Pathologizing cultural values. This is where, you know, they say to Black people, oh, you're so loud. It's like, why don't you quiet down? Or Asian or Latina people, it's like, oh, you're so quiet. Why don't you speak up more? You know, that's basically saying assimilate to the dominant culture. Second-class citizen, person of color mistaken for a service worker. That has happened to me probably way too many times. And I'm not, like, it's funny when you walk through a store and you're not even wearing the clothes of the store, but people are like, you work here? Yeah, nope. So that assumes that, you know, people of color are going to always be in low level jobs. Environmental. This is where the something like a school is going to have buildings with only heterosexual upper class males, giving the idea of you don't belong here, you won't succeed here. So I've said a lot, but here is a little bit of a chance for us to participate. If you feel comfortable, and you don't have to share, but if you feel comfortable sharing an experience, sharing something that was said, and it doesn't have to be just a racial microaggression, it can be some other type of microaggression, and either put it up in the micro-assault, micro-insult, micro-invalidation category, or you can put it up in some of the categories that we talked about already. Sharing time.
I think this would fall under second-class citizen. I don't know, but we were in a class. This happened last year, I think. The class was mostly Nepali students, and the professor was using an analogy of a tricycle, and they looked at us and said, well, some of you might not have been able to afford a tricycle based on where you came from. And sometimes they said, you know, oh, wait, have you guys seen these calculators? Have you used this before? So that was something very, I mean, people walk up to me and speak in Spanish every day because they think I'm Hispanic. But this is something that was really heartbreaking to me and my classmate, and I wasn't sure if it was wrong because, wait, am I overthinking? I don't know if, you know. And then I looked at my classmates and they all had their eyes wide open and they were like, wait, did they just say that? I think that falls under micro insult.
Yep, I definitely put that in micro insult. there's that underlying, dig or stereotype. Yeah, definitely. And we'll also talk about kind of the psychological impact coming up, because what you're describing sounds a lot like what other people feel when they experience a microaggression. You speak good English, ascription of intelligence, this idea that, because of your race, because of your background, that you wouldn't be able to speak good English. Definitely.
May I share one?
Yeah.
So as a Latina, one of the things that I've experienced is that people don't often believe me when they realize I have a PhD. And I would even call it a bit of a micro invalidation, right? This idea that as a Latina, there's no possible way that I could have gotten as far as I have. And I can't tell you how often I've been mistaken for a student by other students and by other faculty members. So there's an assumption that there's no possible way that I could be the professor in the room. I've also been asked if I speak English. I've been asked where I'm from, seen the full range of responses. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. All right. Oh, sorry, one more.
Sorry, I was going to say I've had a couple of experiences at a couple different jobs where my colleagues have said he or she Jewed me down.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I don't even know if that's a micro insult. Is that just an insult?
It would, well, it's conscious, somewhere between might be even a micro assault in some ways, because if they, depending on how conscious it was.
In both cases, after it was said, there was a kind of recognition and an apology, which was good.
Yeah, but it being said.
Yeah. And
thank you for sharing.
I know for me, it's not like a racial microaggression, but I'm dyslexic, and when I tell people that, I always get, "Oh, but you're so smart," or like, "Oh, but you get good grades," and I'm like, well, that's not quite it, but it's like, I guess it's nothing compared to racial microaggression, but yeah.
There's different, there's different dynamics going on, but I feel like, because I brought it out, that yeah, we want to talk about all microaggressions that we've experienced, and microaggressions are experienced through, if you have a disability, if you have a different gender, if you have a different sexual orientation, race, and it's also very difficult when you have more than one of these things. You're gay, Black, female with a learning disability. It's like, think about all the microaggressions that someone's probably experiencing with all those different identities that go against the more privileged identities in America. Yeah. So I'm gonna move on, and I'm gonna talk about outcomes. And this is the psychological dilemmas that we're talking about, and the things that we want to watch out for, the things that if we are someone who might think we might perpetuate a microaggression, or just for us, if we've experienced it, to give us a sense of, yeah, this is what I felt, like that, normalize that this is an experience that other people have felt as well. And to start off, I will show you a video, hopefully also very funny.
After all this time, you find...
Okay, let's ignore that.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
All right. Oops. There we go. So this matters, and why it matters. Actually, I'm gonna look at the chat, see what people said. Oh yeah, everyone. I'll send you the video and the slide, and I think it's being recorded. So I'll send you the videos if you give us the emails. And why it matters is it creates dilemmas for people who are experiencing these microaggressions, as you saw with the one woman and the black woman that they're showing with getting all the mosquito bites. It's like all of these things create stress, and over time, it's having a cumulative stress over and over and over again is going to lead to anger, frustration, sadness, lower self-esteem. I'll talk a little bit further about that in a second. But even in terms of interactions, it creates a bit of a dilemma. If someone says it, the other person is probably going to go, should I even address this? Did this really happen? And it creates a tension between that person who've experienced and that person who presented it. This can create accumulative psychological harm as well as even physical harm in some ways. And the power of this comes in their invisibility. So it's important that we make it as visible as possible to foster some healing. That's part of why this lecture series is here. But it's also important that and I'm not even just talking about the people who experience microaggressions, I'm talking about people who feel like they've provided a microaggression. If they feel like it's okay for them or feel safe enough to say, you know what, I'm realizing that I'm white in this context, or I have a position of privilege in this context, it might be important to bring it out so that the other person feels comfortable in really being able to address the harm that was done. But I'm skipping the gun a little bit here, or jumping the gun a little bit. Monkey wrench, invisibility. How much time do I got? Maybe I have a second to tell one of the stories. I was in a play. I had a bachelor's degree in fine arts and in musical theater. And there was a very sensitive play around race. It was called Parade. It was around race and actually a lynching of someone who was Jewish. So it was interesting because it was it was a story about race and a story not about race, but it was a lot about discrimination. And during this story, a lot of the Black characters, of course, were slaves or former slaves. And they were moving around set pieces a lot. And at some point, I was in this place. I was with the other Black members of the cast, and there is a song that has a line, "Oh, I bet you thought the slaves were free." And between us, that was kind of a joke because we're moving around all these set pieces constantly, and we felt like slaves. It was a joke between us. Now the director, a white female, caught wind of this and thought it was funny. Now, when she did that, and she started to use it, she used that joke when she assigned more set piece movements. And I recognized with the cast, I feel odd about this. And I feel like you guys feel odd about this. And I talked to them about it, and they're like, yeah, this is really like, doesn't feel good to constantly being told this by her. It was important, and I went up to her one day and I told her about this and our feelings about it, and then she was able to take it. She's a very wonderful person. She understood, and there was definitely a dilemma for me because I thought, oh, is she gonna hate me? Is she gonna take this personally? Is this and so there's a lot of stressors even before I even decided to talk to her about it. But the fact is that if I didn't make it visible, or if she didn't make it visible that this was a racial issue, this is a microaggression, there was no way we could heal, and there's no way that she could do something differently. And I also wanted to, I don't have a lot of time, but in the next slides, I'll show you just some vignettes. A lot of the invisibility comes from the fact that there are valid reasons. There's always valid reasons for what someone generally says is a microaggression. And that's part of the problem. If I had enough time, I would have asked you to come up with some reasons for some of these, but I'm gonna read it and you can think about it for a second. You're a person of Asian descent working in a library. A patron comes up to you and says, "You speak so well. I've always wanted to teach my daughter Chinese, but it's so difficult to teach." So take a second and think, what are the reasons that the person who said this felt that it was okay to say? You could probably think of a few even. You're like, oh, I didn't mean it. I was just saying that, I love the Chinese language and just wanted to connect with you. I thought you were Chinese. I just said Asian descent. It might not have even been Chinese. Moving on. You are a Black female. You started a new job in a company and you are just finishing at work. While wrapping up, one of the managers tells you, "I was surprised to see how articulate you were. Great job on the presentation." A reason might have been, "I just wanted to compliment you. There's nothing to do with race." Or, I thought you did a good job. What do you mean? Why are you bringing this up as a racial issue? You're a Latinx person. You walk into a store and a white male looks at you with suspicion. You tell the white friend with you and he says, "Man, it's probably nothing. Maybe he's the owner or something." Even with the white friend who you think is a friend is saying, "Oh, well, you don't have to worry about it." But there's a clear description of criminality, and even he's seeing it without noticing his bias there. And his reason might be, oh, he's just making sure I just think he's making sure that no one steals from his store. Obvious microaggression, but there's probably other reasons he might have said it too, and you might come up with a few. So this presents the huge kind of problem with microaggressions. Clash of racial realities. Black people feel like there's a different reality than white people. In Dr. Daryl Wang Su's research, he finds that a lot of white people believe equality is here. race isn't so much of an issue for people of color. Um, People of color can, if they work hard, they'll succeed no matter what, if they just work hard. And then sometimes people of color see white people as they're insensitive to race. They not willing to have conversations about it, to share in wealth or share in power or privilege. And so those things clash together. And the invisibility is unintentional expressions of bias. We talked a little bit about that before, how people can always come up with reasons for why they said what they said. And that presents a problem for the person of color who wants to say this was not okay. Because was it a microaggression? Who determines what a microaggression is? How do I know if I say it, will they just come up with reasons, or will they actually take in what I just said? Perceived minimal harm or racial microaggressions. Again, that sense of, I think someone said it at the beginning, of it being like small little things. Well, what we don't recognize is these small little things are these mosquito bites that happen every day, constantly, for people of color. And that, it's not as small as we think. And the catch-22 of responding is like, if I respond with anger, which might be my natural reaction, people are going to could see me, because I'm a Black male or a Black female, as, oh my God, just an angry Black person again. Well, that's another microaggression thrown at me for a natural response. Or or the person of color might be thinking, oh, am I gonna get in some trouble because this person is a person of higher authority? Or is it even worth it? Are they going to change something? Or should I keep it to myself? And that can even happen from people to color to people of color, where they say, oh, it's not worth it, just let it go. But that also creates some psychological harm. And here's just some examples, not an exhaustive list. Increased heart rate short term, low performance, because you're thinking constantly about this thing. Tension in the body, difficulty concentrating, long-term emotional burnout, high blood pressure, constant stress increases your blood pressure, neck and back pain, lowers self-concept. So these are important, which I think is why everyone's here. We want to do something to make sure that we reduce the chances of this happening for the people of color on our campus, and the people who, just in terms of broader microaggressions, are in positions in society that are lower privileged. So I said a lot. Let me just look at the chat real quick. Is there anything? Okay.
Alex, can I say something?
Sure.
So there's this idea of non-conscious ideology.
Mm-hmm.
It's when people with privilege don't even realize that the environment is not accommodating for people who are of different identity, right? So, for example, someone who's Christian will not even notice that there's nowhere else in Caldwell to pray except for those allocated places where there's only you know what I'm saying. So like I don't use a wheelchair, so I don't even know that for me to get from Warner to the science building, I have to take a whole turn around and then go there. So this idea of non-conscious ideology says that if you're privileged, you won't even know. And it's often unintentional. So I think that's when it matters to listen to someone when they're telling you that, this is not good. And instead of just blaming it again on them, to be mindful and to change slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny you say that, Yaman, because I feel like the next slide points that out, of exactly what you said. That this is for a person who is in privilege, who has a little bit more of a biased worldview to their either gender, race, etc. if they've been accused of microaggression, or if they have the power to change something. You know, I've put out a few of these ideas to help you, you know, interact with that differently. And I like the idea of, you know, being mindful, being able to recognize their reality. And if you have the power to, and the responsibility to change it, you know, do it. So I tried to, I wish I could have made this into an acronym, but I wasn't able to. Hopefully Colleen will send the slides out, or the recording. But I just put out a few bullet points. And I'm gonna skip a bunch of the slides, but I'm just gonna give you an idea of these bullet points. And then I'm gonna go towards, if you're in a conversation on either side, what to look out for and what to do to help. Recognize, this is a person who is accused of microaggression. So recognizing their socialization, this is kind of recognizing, okay, I have lived in a white community for most of my life. I'm probably not very good at quickly being able to understand someone else's, a person of color's experience, a person who's from a different country, a person from a different socioeconomic background, and recognizing that, so that maybe you can have a little bit of a better chance of listening. Understanding the context, and what I mean by that is, are you a teacher in a powerful position compared to the students? Are you a manager? Are you a director? Recognizing that, especially the other person coming to you and maybe saying something that you've done that hurt them, is a vulnerable position. And if they do that, you know, understand their reality, try to at least listen to them before saying all your reasons, all your excuses, all your judgments. And probably, if you can avoid doing that, the defensiveness, the reasoning, those kinds of things, to recognize that and try to avoid that. Allow the invisible to be visible, meaning if you're realizing, maybe they said something along the lines that almost didn't seem like it's a racial thing, but you feel like it might be, and you feel comfortable enough to bring it up. Hey, you know, I know that I'm Black, I know that I'm white, and I probably don't really understand your experience, or, you know, I want to learn though. I'll listen, and I'll try and do my best to see something differently. And take appropriate responsibility for the outcome. Like if someone says to you, you know, I really don't want you to, it feels painful when you say that in class. You know, if you have the ability to do that or not say that, you know, don't say it. Or if you have the ability to do it, you know, I really would ask you to consider to do it. And again, remember the intention and the outcome. You know, if your intent is to have positive relationships with people of color, you know, really listen to their reality. Again, moving very quickly through the slides. This is a slide for people of color engaging in a difficult conversation. And I'm just going to read this out. Before you decide to engage in a difficult conversation, is this person worth talking to about this? Do they have the capacity to change? Set a time limit for yourself and take breaks. The conversation may end up looking like homework for the other person, so remember that, you know, there might be some defensiveness that shows up there. No one is going to learn everything in one conversation. Consider whether you want to call them out or call them in. Is it more appropriate to have other people around, or is it more appropriate and more helpful for you to bring them aside and say to them, you know, that really hurt me? It might reduce some defensiveness by doing that. Go into the dialogue knowing your sense of worth, because some of these things, if you don't have a sense of boundaries, it can further entrench your hurt and only make them more entrenched in their beliefs or in their reasoning for what they said. And be aware of your mental health. If you're fighting all the time, it's not going to be easy. You're not going to be able to last. And knowing when you need rest or need a community of like-minded people who can help you and say like, yeah, that was messed up. And again, I'm going to quickly run through this because I got 2 minutes. But in the moment, for someone who is, for actually both sides really, but this is a little bit geared towards the person who's experienced the microaggression. These are some ideas that you can use to help have a good conversation, a conversation that can lead to possible healing. Inquiring, impact preference statements, reflecting, reframe, revisit. So inquiring is, okay, that person just said, I don't think it was a big deal that the cops were, I don't know, I don't think it was a big deal that the cops were beating up on that guy. Inquiring, okay. I know Robin just gave me a look. Maybe that's not the best one, but I don't think it was a big deal that the cops looked at you that way. There you go. And you might ask them, hey, what did you mean by that? What were you trying to say? Give them a chance to kind of explain their thinking, and then they might realize themselves, that I get what you're saying. That was messed up. I didn't think about your point of view. You might say the next one, impact preference statements. That's saying to someone, what you just said to me made me feel like you didn't understand my point of view. I would prefer next time that maybe think about, hey, what is the Black experience? Or you might think about, hey, I would prefer you didn't say that. Or I would prefer that, before, I'm trying to think of a good example. I would prefer that you listen to what I have to say before responding with a judgment, something like that. Reflecting. Someone says to you, let's see if I have a good example here. Yeah, I don't. But someone says to you, hey, I think that you, where are you from? Or I don't know where you're from. Tell me something. Are you from China? Are you from wherever? And you might say to them, so when you said that, I felt like you were saying that I'm not from America. That's a reflection. It takes a little bit of the judgment out, because I feel like the initial reaction might be, why would you even dare say that to me? Or so you're saying that I'm a foreigner, it's that has a little bit more of a heavy weight to it, and might be the initial reaction you have. But being able to kind of take some of that out, just at the beginning especially, can give them a chance to realize for themselves, ooh, that was biased. Reframing, helping them develop awareness, alternative ways of looking at the situation. How would you feel if this occurred to you? How would you feel if you were always followed around the store, or always seen as an employee at a Target, when you go out? That might help. And revisiting, this is the, hey, I need a second, let me go take a nap, let me spend a day, and then come back and say to you the things that I felt were hurtful. Because it's really important that you recognize your own mental health in these things. If we go into a conversation really angry and defensive, it might not really help the conversation. That being said, anger at these kinds of things is a normal process, as we said a few slides above. But it's also important to recognize that in a conversation, it might just entrench the beliefs further. So, all that being said, remember that all of this, being aware, takes time, patience, and practice. And nobody's perfect, but if you have the intention and you focus on your work, whichever side you're on, it goes to provide a more healthy community, more tolerant community. All right. Also, any questions? I also have some resources on the back. Colleen will give you the link to that, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate that. All the work that you put into that presentation. And so perhaps if anyone has any questions right now, I think we can definitely ask Alex, but next week, so next Monday, will be the part 2 of this. So it will be for like discussion and stuff like that. So you can bring more questions at that point too. And yes, Alex, if you can send me your PowerPoint or whatever, I will put it into the Google Drive that we have. And I recorded who came tonight, so we'll send you the link for that. So if people want to look over that before the discussion next week as well.
Great.
This was fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
It was really good.
Dennis asked, is there anything that you want people to look over to prepare for next week? So if there's any like videos or articles or anything like that. There doesn't have to be.
I do not. You can look over the slides, and because there are some slides that I even kind of skipped over, but there's some notes in them that might be helpful for the discussion.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, we'll get that out to everyone then.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Alex.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Alex. Thank
No
you,
problem.
everyone. Thanks, Colleen.
All right, thanks everyone,
Sophie.
and hope to see you next Monday as well.
Yep.
Yep,
Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.